What is up, home workout and bodyweight exercise fans? It's Wednesday Q&A. This means that I'll be answering one of your questions. Specifically, this one is from Andrew, who is 47 years old, and asks, what are some good tips for people that are as old as me, not only in terms of health, but also in terms of building muscle? So Andrew says that he's built 2 kilos of muscle mass during the last 6 months, and he's not that happy with his progress. Tip number 1 is focusing on mind to muscle connection techniques. I have a whole playlist about these. I'll include it above. Basically, the reason I consider mind to muscle so important, especially for people above 40 years old, is not only the fact that it can increase muscle hypertrophy, especially in people that are quite experienced, have been doing bodyweight exercises for a while, but also for people that are bigger in terms of age, because let's face it, your physiology won't be as perfect as you would like it to be. So your body, your natural hormones, testosterone and all that won't be as optimal to build muscle. But what you can do is you can tap more into your nervous system in order to achieve greater muscle contractions. The best way to do that is mind to muscle techniques. As I just said, start with push-ups. I've made a video. It's basically the most basic bodyweight exercise, and once you get it, once you learn how to do mind to muscle connection related push-ups, then you'll be able to apply these to a lot more easier to most of the other exercises. So tip number 1 is not only important for building more muscle, but it's also gonna save you from a lot of injury and a lot of problems with your joints. Why? Well, not only are you able to apply greater intensity to your muscles through MMC, as I like to call it, but because you're doing this in a more mindful way, in a more controlled way, you minimize friction and shear in joints and connective tissue. I've noticed this a lot myself. I've gotten a lot of feedback in terms of this topic, and there's no doubt that this is one of the most important tips that you should be taking advantage of, not only for all people, but also especially when it comes to people that have been training for a while, are quite experienced. So they've reached their genetic potential in terms of how much training they have done with their actual muscles, but they haven't reached yet their ultimate potential in terms of tapping into their nervous system. Tip number 2, this is going to be more for joint health. Your warm-up basically has to be half of your workout. By preparing your body better, by warming up more efficiently, you will also perform better during your workouts, as shown in studies. Warming up properly increases performance. You're also, though, going to decrease injury potential. Now, a lot of us know that after 20 years old, as you grow older towards 30, and after that, your body, once it gets injured, it will recover a lot more slower. So you want to avoid injury potential as much as possible. Warm up properly. Do mobility drills, start with those. Not only are these great to warm up, but they are also a great way to improve joint health and mobility. Now, when it comes to joints, the typical phrase applies: if you don't use it, you will lose it. By doing mobility drills, you are basically using nature's natural lubricant for your joints, because every joint has your fluid. For example, let's take the shoulder, which is basically a fluid that is like grease. So the more you do these kinds of mobility drills, the more this grease goes around the joint, and the more lubricated you keep your joints, the more healthier they will be. By doing mobility drills, you can also increase lost range of motion. So if you're like 40 or 50 and you're very stiff, it doesn't mean that you have to be like that for the rest of your life. By doing mobility drills, you can restore a lot of range of motion back. You can even improve issues from old injuries. For example, you can smoothen a little bit adhesions that might be, residue there from old injuries. And in general, mobility drills should be the core of everyone's warm-up, especially as you're getting older, and especially after past 40 years old. After you're done with your mobility drills, move on to easy sets. So easy sets are basically doing the exercises, doing some basic strength exercises with lower intensity, just enough to get some blood pumped into your muscles. So you're staying as far away from fatigue as possible. You can do some push-ups, for example, some inverted rows, things that are quite easy to your body. And if they're not that easy, you can also decrease the range of motion, just cheat a little bit. You don't have to do the whole rep. This is not the normal part of your warm-up. Just do enough of the repetitions to feel, that your muscles are getting pumped with blood. They're getting more, you're increasing their temperature. Another thing you can do for easy sets is use resistance bands like those there. I like the Body Elastics a lot. So by using resistance bands, you're using more neutral and more anatomic angles of your joints, because if you're doing bodyweight exercises, one of the problems is that you're always in a fixed position. For example, with push-ups or pull-ups, your joints are always used in a fixed position. But by using elastic bands, you give more diversity of movement, of stimulus to the joint. So that way you keep it more balanced, and in terms of also strength as well, more balanced, but also in terms of health. My third but also equally important tip is using more neutral grips. Again, as I mentioned before with the bands, but also in the terms of how you do your exercises. So number one, pull-ups would be the most essential exercise, that you start using more free ranges of motion for your grips. The best way to do that is using rings. There are also other stuff you can use, such as handles with basically handles with rope. You can build them yourselves. It doesn't really matter, as long as your hands are allowed to move freely during a pull-up. This is going to be very important as you grow older. Pull-ups they're not a bad exercise, but a lot of people who just keep on doing them with the same grip, with a straight bar, eventually can get injuries, can get chronic inflammation. So definitely go for rings or for handles in the pull-up exercise. And also keep in mind that using a lot of hyperextension in your grip, so basically this over here in exercises such as push-ups, this position of the grip can also cause a lot of issues in terms of getting nerves pinched, and generally, a lot of sensitivity with the wrists. One of the best ways to avoid that is conditioning your wrists through by learning to do wrist push-ups. I've done a tutorial, I'll include it above. It's not as difficult as it seems, as long as you progress very gradually into these. I've seen that most people, even untrained people, can do them very quickly if they build them up again. Remember, very gradually. If you just start doing wrist push-ups right now on both hands, it's very easy to get them injured. So please don't do that. Work on the tips in the progression video somewhere over here. So we talked about pull-ups, we talked about pushing related exercises, do the wrist conditioning, but also try to use grips. So I have those red ones over there. These are my favorite grips. They're very unstable. I've made another whole review about these grips. I'll include it above as well. A lot of grips are very shaky out there, and you can really easily get injured. So make sure you get proper grips if you do that. That was all. I'll be sharing more tips for people who are training with bodyweight exercises above 40. Let me know if you're interested in these. Leave me some comments below. Also keep in mind that these tips don't apply to people who are older. They're also for people who are sensitive to injuries, who keep on having problems. A lot of young people today are basically have the bodies of so much more older physiologies than they actually have. Keep in mind, have for example Steve Maxwell, who I interviewed a couple of weeks ago, 64 years old, and he can move so much better than the average 20-year-old that I personally know. Age is not just a number, it does affect you, but you can do so much more, because we know nowadays that you can be in pretty awesome shape even when you're 64, like Steve Maxwell. That was all for today. I'll stop talking. I like to talk more about this topic, so if you're interested, leave me some comments below, let me know, and I'll next time